Howdy folks, welcome back to Thunder Mesa Studio. Dave here at the workbench, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Today I want to follow up on a recent video where I talked about some plans for the train room here at the studio. In that I teased an HOn3 project that I've been thinking about. And right now I want to fill you in on all of the details. Like so many of us, I absolutely love Colorado narrow gauge. From the Rio Grande Southern to the Colorado and Southern to the Denver and Rio Grande Western and all the tiny mountain railroads in between, from the 1870s to the 1950s, Colorado narrow gauge occupies a unique and inspiring place in American railroad history where tiny trains fought their way over high mountain passes to regions of gold and silver. It's really no exaggeration to say that Colorado narrow gauge has helped to inspire just about everything that I have done in this hobby. But somehow I've never gotten around to literally modeling it. I mean, all of my layouts draw inspiration from that era, but I've always resisted the temptation to model this or that specific Colorado prototype railroad. Part of that's because there's already so much great modeling being done in this vein, but it's also because there really weren't the resources or equipment available for me personally to do it justice. I've dabbled in a little bit of Colorado modeling, most recently with the N-scale Pagosa in Southern. And while, that was a lot of fun, I never finished it. And that's probably because it just didn't satisfy me because it didn't scratch that narrow gauge itch. Colorado narrow gauge has its own distinct flavor and character. It's different from what you find in the Northeast or out on the Pacific Coast or here in the desert Southwest. And that unique flavor is what I'm going to be trying to capture in this new HOn3 project. As described in my recent video on getting everything to fit, I've carved out a space over here by the shop roll-up door. It's roughly 4 by 10 feet. Not a huge amount of real estate, but enough, I hope, for the little slice of Colorado mountain railroading that I have in mind. I rarely ever use this door now, so I have no qualms about building a layout in front of it, but all the same, this will be built on rollers to remain portable like everything else here in the studio. So with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at the plan I've come up with. After drawing and redrawing maybe a dozen different plans, this is the one I'm actually going to build. It's simple and straightforward, with a loop for continuous running and a climb up to a colorful Colorado mining town where there's room for some switching and a small engine service terminal. This will be what's known as a proto-freelance model railroad, meaning that the locale is made up with a fictional backstory while the railroad itself is real. None other than the Denver and Rio Grande Western, as a matter of fact. But the story of Barlow Pass is written to be quite similar to many of the obscure mountain routes or branch lines that were built or acquired by the Rio Grande. It started back in the mid-1870s as a highly speculative independent line called the Colorado and Union Railroad, with grand plans to cross the Rockies into Utah and lands beyond via Barlow Pass. As was often the case, that didn't quite work out. While fine for mountain men and pack mules, the 10,000-foot-high pass was found to be all but impassable for narrow-gauge equipment of the era. With construction stalled and the timber stands and mining claims along the right-of-way failing to deliver on the promised riches, investors foreclosed, leading to the inevitable bankruptcy and near abandonment of the line. A last-minute silver strike near the headwaters of Pickle Creek piqued the interest of the Denver and Rio Grande, who swooped in and bought the struggling line at a bargain, along with all of its derelict equipment. Of course, the Rio Grande was no stranger to financial troubles itself, but managed to operate the Barlow branch well into the 1940s. The line never did summit the pass, but ended just short of it at a place called Fort Barlow, later shortened to just Barlow, where a town grew up to support the local mines nearby. Barlow, by the way, is my wife's family name. Now, this fictional backstory gives me a solid place to start that's more or less rooted in the historic realities of the time. It also conjures up images of the rugged high country locale where dramatic high bridges and dynamite blasted tunnels would be required to build the right-of-way. It tells me that there's a working silver mine in the area to produce traffic and a remote mountain town that sits at the end of the line. And because the railroad was acquired by the Denver and Rio Grande rather than built by it, that gives me a certain amount of creative freedom to deviate from strict prototype practice when it comes to some structures and equipment. Now, the era that I've landed on to model with this is the 1930s to the early 1940s. And that's partly because of the equipment that's available for that era, and more on that in a minute. But it's more because that was near the twilight of the narrow gauge when all of that funky, grimy, rundown history was on full display. My plan calls for the layout to be built in two sections. The 4x6 Lonesome Gorge section, where most of the dramatic scenery will be, along with the Fickle Lady Mine and much of the town of Barlow. This section will contain a loop for continuous running and the 2% grade up toward the pass. The second section will be 2 by 4 feet and contain the depot, stock pens, and a small engine terminal. I'll probably build both sections at the same time, but will likely finish the terminal section first since I already have many of the structures, kits, and equipment I need on hand. And speaking of equipment, let's take a look at what's going to be running on this railroad. Sadly, HOn3 equipment ready to run locomotives and cars has become rarer than hen's teeth and as such often stupidly expensive. You know, it's not impossible to model in HOn3, but to do so, you need a combination of ingenuity, tenacity, and just plain good fortune. That's a big reason why it's taken me so long to model Colorado narrow gauge. I've been collecting stuff for years and have a few saved eBay searches that alert me when something rare or desirable comes up for sale. But it was really by the good graces of a friend and member of this channel that I'm able to acquire the right mix of equipment to move forward on this project. You know who you are, and thank you. I don't think there's much debate that some of the finest HOn3 locomotives ever produced came from Blackstone models out of Durango, Colorado. A division of Soundtrax, Blackstone imported and sold a range of fine-running and great-sounding DCC-equipped locomotives, all based on Colorado prototypes. In addition to being great runners, they also have amazing attention to detail, with many having details that are accurate to specific prototype locomotives. Sadly, these locomotives are no longer being made or imported, and though the company, Blackstone, still exists as of this recording, there is no indication as to when or if they will ever resume production again. So I consider myself very fortunate to have 3 of these locomotives. I've got one of the beefy K27s and 2 of the lighter C19s. One is painted and unlettered, and the other 2 are lettered for the Denver and Rio Grande Western. I did several tests with these locomotives on different radius curves and on different grades, and that's how I came up with the 19-inch minimum radius and the 2% rule and grade shown in the plan. I didn't finalize the plan until my experiments showed that all of the equipment could handle these comfortably and reliably. Now, if you can't find or afford Blackstone, there are alternatives available, mostly in brass, but to be honest with you, they're priced about the same or more and often don't run nearly as well. And then there were the old MDC Roundhouse 280 consolidation kits. Those came in both standard and narrow gauge. And even though they're out of production, they do show up occasionally on eBay. I have an alert set for those as well. The problem with those is they're kind of hard to put together and very difficult to get to run reliably. They take a lot of work. I don't want to be discouraging if you want to build something in HOn3, but I know how lucky I am to have had the stars align just right to make all of this happen so I can move forward on this project. That said, the plan I created could be built in HO standard gauge as well with very little modification. And there is a plethora of old-time HO scale equipment out there available. So now the cat's out of the bag. The HOn3 Barlow Pass layout will join the Goldfield and Calico, the Thunder Mesa layout, the San Lorenzo mini layout, and the other projects I've got going on here at the studio as we move forward into 2025. Thank you all so much for joining me today as I share these plans, and I hope you're subscribed with those notifications turned on so you can follow along as these projects unfold in the future. You can also follow us on Patreon for free at patreon.com/thundermesa or on Instagram at thunder.mesa. And I hope you'll check out the resources available on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, a big thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos and these projects possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.